This is Off the 11th Hour, and I'm your host, Nathanael Stone, but we all know who the Lord of Hosts is. Say it with me in any dialect you so choose. 𝐤𝐄𝐄, Sabaoth. Kodesh brothers and sisters, fellow members in the body of Messiah, and those in the world, thank you for giving me your attention in a world full of distractions. So we're going to continue with Torah Tuesday with our episode that we have today. I'm excited to present this material. We have Nathan with us. You want to say hello, Nathan?
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be back for another episode. I'm just, ready to hop right into this. Absolutely.
Yeah, we're getting ready. It is semester finals here for
Indeed.
The both of us starting. Yeah. Mine kind of start here later on this week, but everyone else, it's all kind of like what, next week, basically?
Yeah, next week, everyone is kind of doing their finals. Yeah, a lot in person as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot to go over. I just did a really good presentation on the lack of Sabbath inclusivity in sports.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
They wanted to do a social justice topic. And I'm like, I got a social justice topic.
There we go.
It's the fact that we don't have enough people observing Sabbath, and there's not accommodations for it. So basically forces people to leave. But let's get into the topic. And what we're going to be going over today is I want to talk about covenants that are there. What do you, so as far as like biblical covenants, are there any for you, Nathan, that kind of stand out?
To be honest, not really. I still have yet to really learn or even dive into that at all. So I'm just willing to just go off from what you kind of have to offer me here. Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as a covenant goes, what would you say is a covenant? Like necessarily not necessarily connecting with the scriptures, just in general.
A covenant, man. I have no idea, man. I'm not gonna lie. It's I don't think I've ever even dove into that type of term, especially in anywhere I went. So it's this is kind of new to me. Yeah. So
and speaking about new, so they call it the new covenant in the old covenant is what they talk about. And so a lot of times, and they do talk about that in the scriptures, namely the book of Hebrews chapter 7 and 8 talk about this new covenant, old covenant.
Right.
And a lot of times it's connected with the New Testament and the Old Testament. Everything in the Old Testament is all the old covenant, and then starting in the book of Matthew to Revelations, the new covenant. But a covenant is essentially an agreement. Is essentially how it's like a contract.
Right.
Is a good way of putting it. That is there. But I want to get into covenant and in with the scriptures and connect that with a deeper understanding, because our faith is based on the covenant. Is connected the covenant with Messiah and the covenant that is held. Basically, there's a contractual agreement in the scriptures, and Elohim, God, holds his end of the agreement. But then we have our end to hold as well. But the covenant that is made is for his people, and we're going to kind of get into that, and also going to share, I guess, one of the major issues that I have with Romanized Christianity today is essentially the lack of understanding of the covenant, and also that they don't identify. I find that they identify incorrectly, and we're going to get into all that stuff here. But the first thing that I want to share, this is in Genesis, about the deceiving serpent. They have a Nachash. This would be the serpent, as it would say here. The serpent said, and we see a prophecy here. This is Genesis 3:15. And I put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall crush your head, and you shall crush his heel. So there's a lot of pronouns here, so we have to kind of unpack who the pronouns are talking about. I would be the creator that is talking, and he says that, and Elohim said to the Nachash, the serpent. And then he says here, and I, so that would be the creator, shall put enmity between you. So you here would be, this pronoun here would be regarding the serpent.
Okay.
And then there's the woman. He's not saying to Eve, right? He's not talking about this woman, right? Adam, this woman that you gave me, right? Adam,
Right.
or the woman. He's not talking about this. This is a prophecy, and there's also a covenant that is built into this prophecy. And the prophecy is that there's going to be enmity between the serpent and between the woman. And so we have to define like who is the woman. And then he says in between your seed and her seed. And he shall crush your head and you shall crush his heel. So we need to understand who's the he shall crush your head. Who is the yor? Well, the yor is the serpent. So the serpent's head is crushed. Who is the he? Who crushes the serpent head? Just kind of off the top of your head, if you haven't, understood this, is okay. But like as you would see, who is promised to crush the head of the serpent?
That would be, from my understanding, it would be Christ.
That would be correct.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
And we're going to see that here in a little bit when we get into Galatians 3. And then he says, and you, this would be the serpent, shall crush his heel. This would be Christ.
Right.
You can see that's why the key thing here that you see that the H is capitalized.
It's capitalized, yeah.
So you can say the authors put their understanding by capitalizing the H there, but I would agree with this understanding that is a capital H. That is his. This would be talking about Christ's heel. So this happened 2,000 years ago, according to most scholars, scripture scholars.
Oh wow!
Is that his death on the cross was the crushing of his heel. But the crushing of the serpent's head is yet to come. Yeah. But the key thing here to understand is who is the seed? Your seed and her seed. Well, yours is the serpent. Some people deem serpent seed, whether that's physical or spiritual. We don't need to get into that point right now. But her seed, who is the her? Who is the her?
Woman, yeah.
So the seed is. Let's kind of get into it now while we're there, so we can come back. This is Galatians chapter 3. And in Galatians 3:15, brothers, as a man I say it, a covenant, even though it is man's, yet if it is confirmed, no one sets it aside or adds to it. But the promises were spoken to Abraham and to his seed. And he does not say and to seeds, as of many, but as of one, and to your seed, who is Messiah. And so he says seed as in singular. Now, specifically, he is talking about the promise spoken to Abraham and to his seed. Now, we read in Genesis, that's not Genesis 3, that's before Abraham's time.
Yes.
But it is that same singular seed that is there in Genesis 3:15, and here in Galatians 3:16. He says here, not as of many, but as of one, and to your seed, who is Messiah. So this seed is Messiah, but then who, again, let's go back to where we were in Genesis 3, who is the her?
Yeah.
Now, we see this her again in Revelation chapter 12, talking about a great sign seen in the heavens. And this woman, clad with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. In being pregnant, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And then we see that she bore a male child who was to shepherd all the nations. Now, a lot of times they'll see that this is Mother Mary. No, it's deeper than that. So Mary or Miriam in her Hebrew name, is a shadow type in picture, or it's it's a, it points to the greater woman, her being like a representation of that. But we see that this woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by Elohim to be nourished there 1,260 days. Now, when Christ was born, this is a dual-fold fulfillment. I don't want to get too deep into this. When Christ was born, this was fulfilled, but then there seems to be a pointing to another birth. Some point to the 144,000 that would be connected here, but I don't want to. I want to get back into the woman. So here, this woman fled into the wilderness, and it says here that she is nourished 1,260 days. Now, at the end of the chapter, it talks about verse 16. The earth helped the woman. I'm going to go here, verse 14 actually. And the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle to fly into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a time from the presence of the serpent. It talks about that the serpent, out of the mouth of the serpent spewed water like the river after a woman. These are metaphors, things in the vision cause her to be swept away by the river. The earth helped the woman. And then it said that the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to fight with the remnant of her seed. This would be like used in a plural form, the remnant of her seed. So this woman has a remnant that is part of her seed. So in that these people, these remnants of her seed, they are guarding the commands of Elohim and possessing the witness of Yahushua Mashiach, Jesus Christ, that is there. So this remnant of her seed, well, this is the remnant of that woman. So who is that woman? Let's look again in another. Let me think where I just saw it in my head here. Okay. In Hebrews chapter 11, talking about, this is like the heroes of faith, or the mighty men of faith here, right? The word here, belief, ISR puts the word belief here for faith. And so he says, like, by faith, Abel, right? By faith, Enoch, right? Hanak. By faith, Noah, right? By faith, Abraham, right? And then also, by faith also, Sarah. Herself was enabled to conceive seed as she bore a child when she was past the normal age, because she deemed him trustworthy who had promised. And then it says, and so from one, in him as good as dead, were born as numerous as the stars of the heaven, as countless as the sand which is by the seashore. In faith, all these died. And then talks about how they were aliens and strangers on the earth. So one more point to go to, back to Galatians. We're going to go to Galatians chapter 4. And here in Galatians 4, we're going to see this example of Hagar and Sarah. Yeah. Hagar is the mother of Ishmael. Was given to Abraham, not out of faith, but out of flesh. And he's doing an allegory here of the free woman, Sarah, and then the bondwoman, or the slave woman, Hagar. And then he points here that he connects the one, that Hagar corresponds to Jerusalem, which now is in slavery with her children. And then talking about that the Jerusalem above is free, which is the mother of us all. And then he says that, rejoice, O barren, you who do not bear, break forth and shout, you who do not have birth pains. For the desolate one has many more children than she who has a promise, or has a husband. And we, brothers, as Yitzhak was, are children of promise. So we see that there is a connection here with this woman. And to put a point on it, he says that the Jerusalem above is free, which is the mother of us all. And so this woman, that is in connection with being spoken of in Genesis chapter 3, I'm going to argue that this woman here is the people of Elohim, God's people, which he made a nation for. He took a nation for himself, a people for himself out of the nations. Excuse me.
Right.
And this woman is Israel,
Nice.
as we have in the scripture. So through the covenants,
Right.
that we have, I'm trying to find this page here. My notes.
Just
So,
out of curiosity,
Yeah.
Church would also mean God's people. Am I correct? And people would often refer the church as God's wife. So I can also kind of see a connection with God's people being the church, and also kind of being the woman here. So I guess this would be something that I kind of find interesting, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, that's great. Here in Acts 7:38, it's a good thing to pull up. Let me go here. I'm going to go to ESV, and in Acts 7:38 it says it's talking about Moses. Contextually, he's kind of doing a little bit of a historical lesson here, and then he basically saying that this is the Moses who said to the Israelites, "God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brothers." So. He's letting you know, like, this is the Moses that we're talking about, the one that led Israel out of the Red Sea. And then in Acts 7:38, he says here, this is the one who was in the congregation in the wilderness. Now, if you look in King James, because as you see this word here for congregation, if you look in King James translates the word church here in Acts 7:38.
Nice. Yeah.
And this is the word ecclesia or ecclesia, however you want to pronounce that. And it just means a congregation or an assembly that is there. And so he's saying that Moses, if you want to use an Anglicanized word there, he's saying that the group of people that came out of Egypt that was led to Mount Sinai was the church. The church means an assembly. See, a problem that I have with a lot of the Romanized understanding is they perverted words.
Yeah.
And what you just demonstrated just now is that you have there's a bit of a disconnect in your understanding. So that, like, this Torah Tuesdays, this presentation that we're giving is essentially we're doing like a building inspection. Right. And what I just noticed just now is there's a crack in your foundation, so to speak. And there's a separation, which is, what a crack is, with the understanding. And I want to make it clear that the body of people 3,500 years ago is the same body of people today, as far as the group goes. Different people, but the same group. Yeah. God's people, Elohim's people, are his people. It doesn't matter if we're there 5,000 years ago, if we're there 3,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, or now in the present day. The body of Christ is the body of Christ. Everyone is part of that body. There's only two groups in the scriptures, essentially. You're either of Elohim or you're not of Elohim and therefore of Satan. Those are really the only two groups. There's no middle ground. There's not like a third party. There's only two groups that you're connected with, right? It's the sheep or the goats. You're either on his left hand or on his right hand. There's only two groups of people. There's not a middle ground that is there. So,
for future reference, instead of using these Anglicanized words, should I closely mention the terminology that was used back in the days, like more closely related to the Hebrew language, just so I can be kind of in the safe side, because I also kind of like don't want to like fall into that category of making a mistake when it comes to scripture. When it comes to scripture, mentioning the scripture.
So to me, it's not necessarily about word pronunciation as it is character representation. I've repeated that many times. I would say that what's more important is you have an understanding of what the word means than not necessarily not using the word. So So like if you're going to use the word church,
I have to understand.
I would just say that it needs to be used in the right context. See, Rome, the westernized understanding has essentially turned a people into a place.
Yeah.
So church is essentially like a building when it's never supposed to be a building. This is only supposed to be a group of people. It is specifically an assembly or a congregation. So if you're going to use the word church, and in your mind you're going to have the understanding that it's a group of people or an assembly of people, then that's okay to use the term. But ideally, I like to avoid the word. We can get into some more the hidden secrets of the word church, as there's some dark etymology behind it.
Definitely.
Yeah. But I would just say, maybe just use the word assembly or congregation. Might be a little bit better of a word, but if someone else chooses to use the word church, that's their prerogative. I might not even necessarily correct them on that, because there might be more important issues to talk about on there. But I just wanted to point out that you had said that God's people, today is the church. But then we had mentioned that Israel back in the day, there is no difference between his group of people. And in fact, that's kind of you touched on a key thing that we're going to be talking about in today's lesson, is basically how we're supposed to be identifying. And it's through the covenants is kind of how I had wanted to go through the direction. But let's look in ISR. Let me kind of pull this up. Actually, I said ISR, I meant the interlinear. I want to just show you here so that you can see it. That's that word G1577.
Yes.
And this is the same word that ESV translated as assembly, but in Acts 7:38, King James used the word church. And so King James used the word church here, and he's basically saying that the group of people that came out of Mount Sinai is the church then. Or is the assembly then. And that word is used, as we see here, is congregation. It can be used as like a synagogue, but I would, or an assembly, but I would say that it is not to be used as like a building. It's not a building. And we need to get away from the understanding that, church is a building. It is not. It is a group of people.
Right.
And when you start perverting, words a little bit here and a little bit there, you start to get a different understanding. So when he's talking about the church, he's not talking about a building. And also when he's talking, talking about an assembly of people, and the assembly of people who are God's people back in Moses' day are the same assembly of people today. Not as far as the way you categorize them. In Hebrews, something just kind of popped in my mind here. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 3, we see here that he had said in his wrath that the people that were in the wilderness for 40 years were not to enter into the rest. So he says to take heed, let there be an evil heart of unbelief departing from the living Elohim. because we are supposed to be partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast to the end. And then he says that some, when they heard, did provoke, that they came out of Egypt by Moses. And so he says that they shall not enter into the rest, and that they could not enter into because of unbelief. Now, in chapter 4, he says, let us therefore fear lest a promise being left us of entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. Right here in verse 2, this is the key thing that I wanted to bring up. For unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them. Think about that for a second, what he just said. He just said that the group of people 1,500 years earlier, from our perspective, 3,500 years ago, is the same group of people from 2,000 years ago, or present day from the context of writing here.
Writing, yeah.
So he's just saying that the people back in Moses' day was given the same gospel that is now being preached in the book of Hebrews. And so it's the same message, in that they rejected it, they didn't have faith. But he's saying that same message, that same good news, that the evangelizing work was preached into them, and they didn't accept it because they had a lack of faith.
Definitely.
But it's basically connecting that they are the same body and the same group of people, and it's always been that same group of people. So let's get a point on it through the covenants. I want to mention where Jacob got the name, where the name Israel is first found. Sorry, it's in chapter 32:28. When he wrestles with that angel, when Jacob wrestles with that angel, and he wrestles all night to get that blessing, and then when he's finally getting that blessing, when he prevailed, the angel asked him, "What is your name?" He says, "Jacob." And he said, "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For a prince has thou power with God and with men, and has prevailed." So the name Israel, it means that you have prevailed with God. So let's look up that so that you can see it here. The name Israel means he will rule. I wouldn't necessarily.
He will rule.
Yeah, it says
God.
that's
Israel.
Yeah, look here. God prevail. This is the definition
Okay.
I'm looking for.
God prevails.
This is a different.
Okay.
Elohim, or God prevails, is what it means, or one who wrestles with God to get the blessing. So it means also to overcome. Now, if we look in like a comparative of different translations, we'll see here that and has prevailed. Here's another one. ISR says and has overcome. King James says prevailed. Also have prevailed. I'm trying to find another word. Another one that might be overcome, but I'm not seeing it here in this.
It just seems to be prevailed
or overcome.
Overcome.
And so it means to overcome with Elohim. So getting back to Genesis 3, this woman that we see, this seed, the woman is essentially the assembly of Elohim, the assembly of God.
Wow.
His people. And the entire Bible, from Genesis through Revelation, is the interaction of his people with the different kingdoms of the world.
Wow.
And when we look in Exodus chapter 20, and this is the 10 commandments that we have, right? Don't kill, don't commit adultery, don't steal. And then the people say, ask Moses that let you speak with us and not God, lest we die. And it says here that the people stood far off, and Moses near under the thick darkness where God was. And then the Lord said to Moses, thus shalt you say unto the children of Israel, we have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. So he's making a covenant here with the people that he brought out, and takes them as a people for his name. And scripturally, there is no other covenant that is made to where Elohim makes a covenant with another group of people. It's always the same group of people, and the group of people that he labeled them as is Israel. So in Acts chapter 1, as Christ is about ready to go up into heaven, and they all come together, the last thing that the apostles ask Christ before he goes into heaven is, will you at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel? So they're not asking him, are you going to make Christianity the dominant religion in the world? They're not asking him anything about the religion of Christianity or the kingdom of Christianity, but he's asking them, they are asking Christ, are you going to restore again the kingdom to Israel? Why do you think that they asked him that question?
Because they have noticed that, because they have come together.
I'm going to go back here to ISR. This chapter here, why are they asking him, Adonai, would you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? Why? Israel. Like they know he's about to leave.
Yeah.
And why is this the last thing that they ask him? Or what's the significance of, so remember, this is after his death, burial, and resurrection. He is about to ascend into heaven, and they ask him this question. It's the last question that they asked him before, he goes up in a cloud. It says here that they're looking on, and he was taken up, and a cloud hid them from their sight. And, he went up into heaven. So as he's going up into heaven, just before that, they ask him this question, the last question that they asked him, and he says, would you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? Well, let's unpack that for a second. Restore, what does this word mean?
Bring back.
That means that it had it, right?
Yeah.
And now it needs to have it again.
Yeah.
And then they're saying that, would you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? Or as King James says, restore again the kingdom to Israel. So the reason why they're asking this question is because of prophecy. And they understand that Christ is to rule, and the name of Christ's kingdom is?
Israel, to prevail. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, to prevail. Yeah. To get the blessing from Elohim to wrestle this world and prevail. And his kingdom is called Israel. And I'm not talking about the country over there in the Middle East.
No.
But I am talking about here in the scriptures that his kingdom is the kingdom known as Israel, and there's prophecy that it's going to get restored and that this kingdom is going to come into power, which is why they asked him on that. But if the kingdom is not is prophesied to be restored, then what happened to it?
It was lost.
In when? It's okay. Yeah. I will. This is 1 Kings chapter 11. Now, you know Solomon,
yes.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And Solomon was whoring after false gods, as we see, as I have highlighted here. The yellow are the names of the false gods, and then the green is the kingdom it's associated with. And these are are abominations. And so because that happens, he says here that therefore Yahweh was enraged with Shlomo, that's Solomon, because his heart had turned away from Yahweh Elohim of Israel, who had appeared to him twice, and had commanded him concerning this word not to go after other mighty ones here as false gods, but he did not guard what Yahweh had commanded. So he says, because you have done this and have not guarded my covenant and my laws, which I have commanded you, I shall certainly tear the kingdom from you and give it to your servant. Only I do not do it in your days for the sake of your father David. Out of the hand of your son I shall tear it. But I shall give one tribe to your son for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. And then down here in the chapter talks about Jeroboam, and that this prophet Ahijah meets him, who's wearing a new garment, and then he takes hold of a garment, and then he tears it into 12 pieces. And he says to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces. See, I am tearing the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and it shall give 10 tribes to you. But he shall have one tribe for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem. So 2-tribe kingdom and the 10-tribe kingdom. So this is where the split happens. The split happens from Solomon. And the kingdom has been split to this day. To this very day now, even today, the kingdom is still split. The 12-tribe kingdom has never come back together. Now, as we see here in the next chapter, Rehoboam is Solomon's son, who takes control after Solomon dies. And then we already talked about Jeroboam. Jeroboam makes 2 golden calves here.
Yeah.
And he makes 2 golden calves, sets one in Bethel and the other in Dan. And he essentially devised in his own heart and changed the religious system, creating a new holiday on the 15th day. And he also appointed different priests, changed the priestly worship system, and then also told people that they don't have to worship in Jerusalem anymore, but they can go to Dan and Bethel because it's too far, is what he's saying. And then he also made these high places, and he started doing sacrifices on the high places. So because of this, Jeroboam, a prophet, is talking to Jeroboam's wife, and he says here, thus said Yahweh Elohim of Israel, and said that you've done more evil than all who were before you, said that you're provoking me, says that he's bringing evil to the house of Jeroboam, and he basically calls his house dung.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Calls him a bunch of crap, is what he calls them.
That's crazy.
And he said that he's going to sweep it away till it's all gone, and that the whole house of Jeroboam is going to die.
Wow.
Whether by the birds or the dogs. In the first one, and he says, arise, go to your house. When your feet enter the city, the child shall die. Jeroboam, he's killing off Jeroboam's bloodline because of what Jeroboam did. And the 10-tribe kingdom continued in this transgression all the way until we see the fall of Israel. Now, the word Israel in the scriptures can contextually mean a lot of things. It can be talking about the man Jacob. It can be talking about the 10-tribe kingdom. It can be talking about the 12-tribe kingdom in the past. It can be talking about future prophecy of the 12-tribe kingdom in the future. It can be talking about people that are just of the bloodline or people of the spiritual understanding. It contextually, there's a number of different ways that you can look at it, but here, on the context here, it's talking about in the 9th year, the king of Assyria captured 𝐉𝐄𝐄, Samaria, and exiled Yasharal, Israel, to Assyria. So it says here that in this certain time that the 10-tribe kingdom of Samaria was exiled by the king of Assyria. And then later on in the chapter we see here that Yahuwah removed Israel, the 10-tribe kingdom, from his presence as he spoke by all his servants, the prophets. So Israel was exiled from their land to Assyria as it is to this day. So, and this was, written then, and I would say it's also still to this day today. Yeah. This was about 2,900 years ago. So it's a 2,900-year-old problem that we're still dealing with today. And the 10-tribe kingdom was scattered and exiled into Assyria to this day. Now, there are prophecies that the kingdom is going to come back together. I'm going to list a couple of them here. In the book of, which one? We'll do Ezekiel 33. In Ezekiel 33:15, and the word of Yahuwah, the word of the Lord, came to me saying, "And you, son of man, take a stick for yourself and write on it for Yehudah and for the children of Israel." So Judah, the 2-tribe kingdom, and for the children of Israel, the 10-tribe kingdom. He says, and write, and take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel and his commandments. So here we have the stick for Judah and for the children of Israel, the 2-tribe kingdom. And then we have for Joseph and the stick of Ephraim, the 10-tribe kingdom. And he says, then bring them together for yourself into one stick, and they shall become one in your hand. So this is a prophecy, by the way. And so he's talking about these 2 sticks that are representing 2 different branches. The 2-tribe branch, the 2-tribe stick, and then there is the 10-tribe stick. And he's saying that they are going to come together into one stick. This is a prophecy that is yet to be fulfilled. So when the apostles asked, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? They are referring in part to this prophecy. And then see here in verse 19, see, I am taking the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, in the tribes of Israel and his companions, and I shall give them unto him with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in my hand. And the sticks on which you write shall be in your hand before their eyes. He said, I am taking the children of Israel from among the nations wherever they have gone. Now, remember, we just saw that they were scattered into the nations. Assyria scattered them. Yeah. Now he's saying that I'm taking them from among the nations wherever they have gone, and shall gather them from all around, and I shall bring them into their land, and I shall make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel. And one king shall be king over them all, and let them no longer be 2 nations. So we just saw that they split. We saw that the one nation was carried away and essentially digested into the world. And now he's saying that he's going to pull them back out from the world, They're no longer going to be two nations, and they're no longer going to be divided into two kingdoms. And talking about, servant David is going to be king over them, that you're going to have one shepherd walk in right rulings and guard his laws and shall do them, and they shall dwell in the land forever and ever. He should be their prince forever. David had died, by the way, here. He's not alive here. So what David are they talking about?
Yeah, I was going to ask. Yeah,
yes.
What David?
The root of Jesse, the root of David, Messiah. I shall make a covenant of peace with them, an everlasting covenant it is with them, and I shall place them and increase them, and shall place my set apart place in their midst forever. This is talking about New Jerusalem. But it's two sticks made one. It's this prophecy of two sticks coming together into one. It is what Ephesians is talking about. Do I want to do Ephesians? Let's not do Ephesians yet.
Okay.
Let's do Deuteronomy. Now, in Deuteronomy, chapter 29. Now, this is at the end of the 40 years. It's at the end of the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. And at the end of the wandering in the wilderness, we come to now Deuteronomy 29. And he says that these are the words of the covenant which Yahuwah commanded Moses to make with the children of Israel in the land of Moab, besides the covenant which he had made with them in Horeb. So it's basically an addendum to the contract. He is bringing something new into the contract because they had violated it. So as we come down here, you shall guard to do the words of this covenant and do them. In verse 14 it says, and not with you alone am I making this covenant and this oath, but with him who stands here with us today before Yahuwah our Elohim, as well as with him who is not here with us today. Who do you think this is talking about? We're going to see in the scriptures is going to define it, but who is it talking about?
Christ? Is it referring to us today before Yahweh, or as well as him who is not here with us today? Who's not with us today? Is David?
I'll give you I'll give you the scriptures are gonna give us the answer, but it is the generations to follow.
Oh,
so
okay.
Basically what he's saying is that all of you who are alive here today, we're making this covenant. So we're making this covenant with everyone that is here today, as well as with him who is not here with us today. And then we're going to see, as we're going to, continue, we're going to see him contextually talk about children and the generation to come of your children. So now he's connecting. So he says here in verse 14, right, that I'm not making this covenant or oath just with those here today, but those who are not here with us today. Now he's telling us who that is, and it's the generations to come of your children who rise after you. And then he's talking about these to do all according to the covenant that is written in the book of the law. That we are to follow in peace. He says here that I'm kind of skipping back up a little bit, saying that if there's any among you, a man or a woman or clan or tribe, whose heart turns away today from Yahuwah our Elohim to go and serve the Elohim of the nations, he's saying that they need to be cut off. He said that every curse that is written in the book shall settle on them, and that Yahuwah is going to separate them for evil, in that they are going to be cut off. And he says, in the generation to come, and the foreigner who comes from a far land shall say when they say the plagues, like, why did he do all this? And why do they do all this great displeasure? And the people are going to say it's because they forsook the covenant. And they went and served other gods. Therefore, he was displeased, and he brought the curses upon his people and uprooted them from their land. And in the very next chapter, verse 30, and it shall be, now I'm going to let you know contextually, this is us today. It's also 100 years ago. It's also 500 years ago, but this applies to us today. So when you're reading these, I want you to understand that this is applying to us today. And it shall be, when all these words come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, and you shall bring back to your heart among all the nations where Yahuwah your Elohim drives you, and shall turn back to Yahuwah your Elohim and obey his voice according to all that I command you today, with all your heart and with all your soul and with all you and your children. Then Yahuwah your Elohim, the Lord your God, shall turn back your captivity and shall have compassion on you, and he shall turn back and gather you from all the peoples where Yahuwah your Elohim has scattered you. If any of you are driven out to the farthest parts under the heavens, from there Yahuwah your Elohim does gather you, and from there he does take you. And Yahuwah your Elohim shall bring you to the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it, and he shall do good to you and increase you more than your fathers. And Yahuwah your Elohim shall circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed. Kind of come down here to verse 8. And you shall turn back and obey the voice of Yahuwah and do all his commands which I command you today. So he's saying that so as we're going to put this in context, he's saying, I'm going to read two more verses and then I'll break it down. And Yahuwah your Elohim shall make you have excess in all the work of your hand, in the fruit of your body, and in the fruit of your livestock, and in the fruit of your ground for good. For Yahuwah turns back to rejoice over you for good, as he rejoiced over your fathers, if you obey the voice of Yahuwah your Elohim to guard his commands and his laws, which are written in this book of the Torah, if you turn back to Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart and with all your soul, all your being. So what he's saying here is, in verse 29, he said in verse 14 that he's not making the covenant with you alone, not just with those here standing today, but also with those not today. And then he talks about that the generations that come that does evil is going to get separated from the land, and they're going to get scattered. And then when the time comes, that it shall be when you hear these words and then you bring them back into your heart, he's saying, and you shall turn back to the Lord your God and obey his voice, all that I command you today from 3,500 years ago, with all your heart and with all your soul, you and your children, then he's going to turn back the captivity. Even if they're in the furthest parts of the heavens. And he's saying that if you turn back and obey the voice that is commanded today, if you obey the voice, guard his commands and his laws, which are written in this book of the Torah, if you turn back to Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart and all your soul. So, to put it back into understanding what we read, what happened with King Solomon is that his heart was not perfect. Remember, with all your heart and all your soul, his heart was not perfect. And he burned incense to false gods. And we saw the covenant that was made in Deuteronomy 29, with that in doing this, you're going to get basically ripped apart and then kicked out of the land. And then we saw that happen here, down in the chapter. We saw that the garment was split, and then he was given 10 tribes, right? He was given 10 tribes of the two pieces. But then, as we saw what Jeroboam did, is that Jeroboam, after he had control, he went even worse and then caused them to worship false gods and changed the system. And then we saw in 2 Kings chapter 17 that they were taken and exiled by Assyria. And verse 23 says that, as it is to this day, they were exiled from their land. And according to the scriptures, even all the way up into Christ's time, they never came back. Not in fullness and not according to prophecy. So when the apostles were asking Christ in Acts chapter 1, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? They're talking about a number of different prophecies, but one of them is the one that we covered in Ezekiel chapter 37, which talks about the two sticks being whole, right? The one for Joseph, and then there's the one for Judah. And that they're to be coming together. Now, in Ephesians chapter 2, which is probably the last one that we have time for, therefore, well, before I go there, I want to read this. In Matthew chapter 15, just one verse, then we'll go to read Ephesians. Look what Matthew 15:24, what Christ said. You want to read that?
Yeah, I'll read it. It says, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel.
Yeah.
No, see Matt 10:6. Yep.
Right. So Christ himself says that, and if you can see down here in the bottom, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Who are these lost sheep of the house of Israel? He says that he only came for these lost sheep. The reason why Christ came and then died on the cross was for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And in Matthew chapter 10, he says, don't go into the way of the nations, but go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And then he says that, let me find where he says here in verse 23, for truly I say to you, you shall by no means have gone through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man, the son of Adam, the Son of Man comes, is what he's saying. The Son of Man, Son of Adam. So what he's saying is that go and do this preaching work, and he's not going to return until they go through the cities and preach this message to that lost sheep of Israel. And in chapter 15, he says here in verse 23 that he only came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And then we have in Acts chapter 1:6, that will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? So there's got to be some kind of a significance here. So I'm going to read here in Ephesians 2, and then we're going to go ahead and close off. Therefore, remember that you, once nations, that means that they're not now, but they were once the Gentiles, as some translations here, as you see the once Gentiles, that you were once Gentiles in the flesh, who are called the uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision made in the flesh by hands. And at that time, so this is past tense, right? At that time you were without Christ, without Messiah, excluded from the citizenship of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope. I'm going to switch to ISR because I want to hit home with some of these verses here, so that you can kind of digest it a little bit easier. That you were once Gentiles in the flesh, and that at one time you were separated from Christ, meaning that they're not now, but that they were alienated in the separation, alienated from the commonwealth of Israel. Now, this is New Testament stuff. What's he talking about, commonwealth of Israel? Shouldn't it be like the commonwealth of the church? Well, Israel, if you want to, I don't necessarily like the terminology, but I'll use it. Israel is the church, and the church is Israel. There's no separation. And strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope. So he's saying that when you were Gentiles and that you were separated from Christ, you had no hope and you were alienated from the commonwealth and also from the covenants of promise. But in Christ, here it is, you who were far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ. Ephesians 2:13. You who were far off. Where did we see that terminology? In Deuteronomy chapter 30. And if your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of the heaven, from there I shall gather you. They're far off. Basically, if your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of the heaven, if you're far off, because they've been scattered. We also see that in the prophecy chapter of Matthew chapter 24. And he says here that verse 31, he shall send out his angels. Well, that's not it. Where's it at? Let me find. I thought that was it.
Oops.
Yeah, it is 31. I was right. Okay. And he will send out his angels, it's the second half, with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from the one end of the heaven to the other. Talking about that they have been scattered. Now, back in Ephesians 2:13, where we're at, that you who were once far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ, for he himself is our peace, who has made both one. Well, what is he talking about? Who has made us both one? What is that he's talking about?
Combining both sticks.
Yeah.
Combining both.
Remember, the kingdoms were split.
Yeah. It's combining both the lost and the united.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're talking about the kingdom was split.
Yeah.
And he's talking about that they're going to be reunited and both be made one.
Yeah.
Broken down in his flesh, the dividing wall of hostility.
Yeah.
And he might reconcile us both to God in one body through the cross, thereby killing the hostility. And he came and preached peace to those who were far off and peace to those who were near. For through him we both have access in one spirit to the Father. Here it is. This is the key verse here. Verse 12 and 19. So then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Christ Jesus himself, Yahushua HaMashiach himself, being the cornerstone, in whom the whole structure, being joined together, grows into a holy temple in the Lord, in Yahuwah. In him you also are being built together into a dwelling place for God by the Spirit. So he's talking, this is New Testament terminology, and he's saying that we are going to be that through Christ, we're fellow citizens. Well, citizens means that you're what? Part of what?
Part of a nation.
Right, a kingdom, right.
Yeah.
Right. And the kingdom is listed verbatim here, right here, Commonwealth of Israel and the covenants of promise. So he's telling these people 2,000 years ago, after Christ died, resurrected, and ascended into heaven, this is first century Christians that he's speaking to. And what is he saying to them? That through Christ, you're part of the Commonwealth of Israel and you are citizens of Israel. Spiritual, but physical too. Yeah. And don't get confused by the country over there. I'm not talking about that because they didn't return with Christ. So
I know.
Yeah, it's a whole problem.
I know
But we're citizens of Israel. So the key thing, that I wanted to share, we're over at time here, that I wanted to share is that how we need to identify, according to Scripture, verbatim Scripture, is that we were once Gentiles in the flesh, and that we were separated from Christ, but since we're part of Christ and have accepted him, therefore we are connected into the commonwealth of Israel and of the covenants of promise. And therefore we are fellow citizens being built into this structure, this kingdom, and being joined together, a holy temple. We're all, right, he is the chief cornerstone, but we are supposed to be living stones. You familiar with that?
Yeah.
1 Peter 2:5, you yourselves are like living stones being built up as a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood. So we are like living stones being built up as a spiritual house. Well, what is that spiritual house? We just covered what that house is. That spiritual house is is that temple right here, is that holy temple that we are being joined together. He is the chief cornerstone, but we are as living stones, and we are being all connected into a structure that grows into a holy temple in the Lord. But all that being said, we are fellow citizens of the commonwealth of Israel. Wow. and connected into the covenants of promise. This is the problem that I have with the majority of Christians today, is that they don't identify as what Christ's kingdom is. And I get it. You want to call yourself a Christian? Call yourself a Christian. I have no problem with that, as long as you're meaning that you're a follower of Christ and not a man-made institution. But the major thing that I feel that is really missing is that people today are not identifying as Israelites. And we are supposed to be identifying as Israelites, as the scriptures point out. And just to really drive the point home, so much so that it is literally the last thing the apostles asked Christ of a prophecy that is meant to happen. Are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel? The reason why they asked him that is because of the prophecies that Israel has to come back together. Because remember, this woman in Revelation chapter 12 that had the crown of 12 stars, which represents the 12 apostles as well as the 12 tribes. This woman, there is a remnant that this war on the offspring happens. They're holding the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus, but that this woman is Israel. And it is that New Jerusalem that we covered, and it is that New Jerusalem that holy city that comes down from heaven, which is the symbolization of the mother of us all that we covered in Galatians chapter 4. And we're supposed to be identifying as Israelites. And it's an issue, the disconnect, because there's a lot of regulations and terminologies in the entirety of the scriptures, Old Testament and New Testament, that is talking to Israelites. He's talking to us. Again, remember, the same church of Moses' time is the same church today. Remember in Hebrews 4:2 that they got that same gospel message as we got today. And you could say that we, us today, are giving the same gospel message that they had from 2,000 years ago as they had from 3,500 years ago. It's the same body. is only one body. There's not, there's not multiple body in the one episode that we did.
Yeah.
Remember talking about divisions. Well, I follow, Cephas, or I follow Christ. I follow Paul.
Yeah.
Right. He says, is Christ divided? No, he's not divided.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. And right. So in Moses' day, that is the body.
That is the body.
And those that are accepted into, into the new kingdom, but the body has not been divided. It is the same assembly, and they're given the same message, and God's people, the covenant of God's people is Israel. It was first given to Jacob, but as a name, but you could connect it all the way back to Abel, like Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
You could say Abel was an overcomer. He's listed in the Heroes of Faith episode, because episode in the Heroes of Faith chapter that we covered. In Hebrews 11, it talks about by faith Abel, right? By faith Noah, by faith Enoch. We covered all that. But then, as it says here, it says that they were looking to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. Wow. And then he says here that they were seeking a homeland, and that they did not receive. They all died in faith, not having received the promise. Well, who is all? All is Abel. Abel is part of the all. Abel is part of that kingdom, and God's kingdom is named Israel. That's part of the covenant with Jacob. In the next time we meet, I'm going to have a better presentation put together.
Yeah.
And I want to go over the covenants that were given from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, into the Mosaic covenant, into with David, and in with Messiah in the different covenants, but to show you that they're all connected into the same body, and there's only one group of people that he made covenant with, and he's listed, and it's Israel. Now, we can call ourselves Christian as we're followers of Christ. All Israelites, all of God's people, are supposed to be followers of Christ, 100%.
Yeah.
So you could label us all as Christian, no problem. Sure. But you also need to understand that Christians are part of the kingdom, and the kingdom is Israel. And it's a major disconnect that people have, so that when we see commandments in the Old Testament and they're talking to the children of Israel, remember, the covenant was not just made with the people 3,500 years ago. It was also made with the generations that came forth. In the good news of the kingdom is that we can all graft in, whether we're bloodline or not. We can all graft in. But we're way over time. I wanted to.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
What would be the preferred term? I would just call. I know, what terms don't really matter and all, but I do want to get into into the correct aspect of everything. So we're all essentially. Followers of Christ would essentially just be Israelites. Israelites is a whole word. Israelites, not the country, not the ethnicity. I'm talking about. Followers. Followers, the congregation.
We're supposed to be labeling. As the Father labels us, we are Israelites. Here, I'll show you.
Yeah,
it's a great question. Let me show you here in Revelation. Right, it's good because Christians represent, they recognize New Testament, a lot. So if I show them something out of the New Testament, it tends to have more weight than the Old Testament, because they'll be like, that was done away with.
Doesn't apply anymore.
Right. Well, here's New Testament stuff. Remember, we covered this just moments ago of New Jerusalem coming down from heaven. Contextually, as it happens, is the dragon is seized, right? He's thrown in for 1,000 years. And then we have here at the end of the 1,000 years, he's released. And then we have a dragon. The dragon is thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur. And then we see the great white throne of judgment. And then we see that even death and Hades are thrown into the second death. If anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Next chapter now, New Jerusalem coming down from out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And then we see, well, he says, it is done, the Alpha and the Omega. Okay. Now, in New Jerusalem, we see the great high wall with 12 gates, and on the names were of the 12 tribes of the son of Israel were inscribed. Think about that for a second. So in this city, there's a great high wall, and there's only 12 openings.
Yeah.
3 on the east, 3 on the north, 3 on the south, 3 on the west. The wall of the city had 12 foundations. So of the 12 gates, there's only 12 gates into the city.
Right.
So that means that the only way to get into the city is through the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel. There's significance that is there.
Yeah.
Meaning that the only way to get into heaven, in a New Jerusalem, if you will, in the everlasting kingdom, is you have to enter through one of the 12 tribes. So if Israel was done away with and now we're the church, then why doesn't he say that we're, entering through the gate of the church? Yeah. Where's the church gate? Right? Well, you could argue that the church gate, there's 12 church gates. Yeah. If you're going to use the word church as meaning assembly or congregation, right. And a tribe is nothing more than just an assembly of people, a congregation of specific type of people that is there. And so in order to enter into New Jerusalem, you have to enter in through one of the 12 tribes. Wow. And there's a significance behind that, is that in Ezekiel chapter 47, I wasn't going to go over this, but I will now since you asked.
Yeah.
In Ezekiel 47:21, you shall divide this land. This is this is a prophecy, by the way. This is Ezekiel's temple.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, so you shall divide this land among you according to the tribes of Israel. You shall allot it as an inheritance for yourselves. Here it is, and for the sojourner who reside among you, and have had children among you, they shall be to you as native-born children of Israel. With you they shall be allotted an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. In whatever tribe the sojourner resides, there you shall assign him his inheritance, declares the Lord God, Yahuwah Elohim. So they're saying that whatever tribe that you decide to pick, then there you're given your inheritance. You're as a native born. But he says here, notice here, for the bloodline, right? Yeah. And the sojourners who reside among you. Where did we just see that terminology? I'll bring it back to your memory. Here, we read this, and he says that, remember that at one time you were Gentiles, and he said that you were separated from Christ, and that you were strangers to the covenant, that you were alienated. And that he says that you are no longer strangers and aliens, but fellow citizens. That sojourner is a stranger and alien. That is the terminology that is there. In fact, if I maybe go to use ISR, well, they use strangers and foreigners. Let me see if they use that same term. Let me find it here. Yeah, so they use the same term. Right. And for the strangers who sojourn. So, and for the strangers. So he's saying that you're no longer strangers. So he's saying, and for the strangers who sojourn in your midst. and who bear children among you, they shall be as native born. And so we see the strangers who sojourn among you, and we see here that just had it, that you are no longer strangers and foreigners, verbatim, but fellow citizens. So this is what he's talking about here. In Ephesians 2:19 is a reference to Ezekiel 47:21 through 23. He's saying that you're no longer strangers and foreigners, but you're fellow citizens of what? Of the commonwealth or the citizenship of Israel. And remember in Revelation chapter 21, in order to enter into New Jerusalem, you have to go through one of the 12 gates. And the 12 gates are named after the 12 tribes of Israel.
Wow.
Yeah. And so yeah, there we go. Are named after the 12 tribes of Israel. Yeah. It's a shadow. It's a spiritual vision, a metaphor that in order to enter into New Jerusalem, you have to enter in through one of the 12 tribes, and the only way to get inheritance is to sojourn with them, and then essentially attach yourself into one of the 12 tribes. Yeah,
become a citizen.
Become a citizen. Yeah. I mean, he even says here in Romans. I mean, we're just going to go keep going on, but in Romans is talking. We can go into deeper into this, but talking about the branches being broken off, and he talks about two different kinds of trees. There's the natural branches. This would be the bloodline, and then there is the wild olive tree. This would be the people that are not of the bloodline, but that we could be grafted in among them, and that we come to share the root and fatness of the olive tree. Now, we're not grafted into the 2-tribe kingdom. We're not grafted into the 10-tribe kingdom. We're grafted into the root, which is Elohim, which is God. But we need to be grafted in to this tree, and the tree has 12 tribes, 12 branches, you could say, and we get grafted into one of those 12 branches. I mean, there's a lot of symbolism that is here, similar like the trees bearing 12 fruits. That's number 12, and the woman has 12 stars on her head. It's all referencing of Israel and the 12 tribes of the 2 sticks made whole. Remember, Solomon brought false god worship into the land. The kingdom was split, and it never came together since. 2,900 plus years of a problem. And 2,000 years ago, the apostles asked if that problem is going to be rectified, and he said it's not for you to know when that happens. He never said it's not going to happen. He said it's not for you to know when it happens. And so when we identify, it's okay to identify as a Christian, no problem with that. But we need to understand that even in the New Testament, we need to identify as Israelites. And that we are part of Israel. So we need to be part of that kingdom. And a kingdom has a location. His kingdom is not of this world.
Right.
That means that the kingdom that we hope to get into is not of this world. And it's a city that is made by the hand of God, not by the hand of man. That's what Hebrews 11 talks about that we saw. But a country which has a jurisdiction and a location, New Jerusalem, right? But there's also laws and regulations. And so and this is why I believe that Satan has attacked this, is because when you don't identify as an Israelite and you read things in the Bible that are talking to the children of Israel,
you're assuming
you're like, well, that's not me.
That's not me. That's
those people.
That's those people.
Oh, well, this law and regulation is for them, not for me.
Not for
Rules for thee and not for me.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's a way of Satan to get people to disconnect.
Oh, wow.
Kind of like in the beginning of this teaching,
Yeah.
you were like, well, you basically had
said, oh yeah, the church
Uh-huh.
is God's wife, or well, I said,
right, but
yeah,
but
I wasn't referring to the congregation as a whole. I said,
Yeah.
I was thinking about the place, the building itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And wow.
So exactly, and so
Yeah.
this is the disconnect, and
Yeah.
this is what we need to reconnect through study.
Yeah.
That is there, and it's something that I want to pass on,
Right.
as as we're gonna both basically have the winter break.
Yeah.
You can meditate over this, and then if you do any personal study or any scriptural research, when you read anything that's talking about Israel, it should be referencing us.
Yeah.
Because if you aren't identifying as Israel, then there's a disconnect that is there.
Yeah.
And all Christians need to be identifying as Israelites. Yeah.
You know what that means, guys?
Oh.
You gotta honor the Sabbath. Honor the Sabbath, please.
Yeah. But and a lot of other regulations. But we'll get into more. We're way over on time. We're about a half hour over on time.
Mm-hmm.
But here, so the pearl. Let me reach that. Is it right? Oh, it's right there. The don't cast pearls before swine portion that I do. What would you say is the pearl of the episode?
I would say the main takeaway here is that we are Israelites, and no matter what kind of terminology that you use, you have to take into consideration that whenever you're reading the context of scriptures, you have to take into consideration that the Israelites is applying to you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great understanding.
Yeah.
So remember, guard your heart, guard your soul, guard Torah, or pay the toll.